class-leading chassis rigidity and next-level all-wheel drive electronics to ensure it responds to inputs with urgency, it changes direction the second you ask it to, and the power hits almost telepathically. Does anyone else see the irony here? I mean, for a car that looks and goes so damn fast, it sure took its sweet time to get here. Then again, as they say, you can't rush greatness. So is that what we've got here? I'm about to find out. Because it took so long to arrive, we've had plenty of time to digest all the details of this Acura supercar. From the 6 cylinders and 2 turbos to the 3 electric motors and 9 speeds on its dual clutch transmission. And then there are the really big digits, like how much power it makes and just how much it costs. But none of that tells you what you really want to know, and that is, what is it like to drive? I can tell you it's glorious, it's outstanding. I mean, it's more than that though. I mean, this is a bucket list experience for me. I have to say that I'm driving the modern incarnation of what is easily the greatest supercar Japan has ever produced.
Fans of the Nissan GT-R and Toyota Supra, please take a moment to voice your displeasure in the comment section now.
Okay, time's up, back to the track. There might be turbo lag in this car, but honestly, you can't tell. And that's because the rear electric motor is producing 109 foot-pounds of torque that is delivered instantaneously. And to keep you from oversteering yourself into a wall, the twin electric front motors can each add 54 pound-feet of torque to claw you out of a corner. By differing the speeds of the inside and outside wheel, it can use electricity, both output and regeneration, to physically make the car corner. Feels much more stable than you would expect. I mean, normally on a mid-engine car like this, you really have to be cautious coming out of a corner. I mean, you don't want to give it too much throttle or it's just going to oversteer you right off the track. But here, I mean, you don't have to worry about that at all. It challenges you to just hit the throttle earlier and earlier, way sooner than you think you should be able to. The amazing thing is you don't notice all the technology in this car. I mean, the steering, it just feels totally natural. And the regenerative brakes, I mean, they feel as normal as they do powerful. And the car just feels remarkably nimble, which is pretty surprising because at 3,800 pounds, I mean, that's 600 pounds more than an Audi R8. It really shouldn't feel this way. If I didn't have a speedometer in front of me, I never would have guessed I just did 125 miles an hour. If I have anything to complain about, it's that the NSX is almost too isolated. I mean, I know I'm not this good, but this car sure makes me feel pretty spectacular. Look, so I'm pretty sold on this car's performance, but let's be honest here, one of the original NSX's claims to fame is that it was a livable supercar. So, can you really drive the new NSX every day? The answer to that question is absolutely. This car is just so civilized. I mean, Acura actually says it's the quietest vehicle out of any of its competitors, and I can definitely believe it. On the center console here, there's a little knob you can turn with 4 different control settings, and the basic one is actually called Quiet Mode. This is, after all, a hybrid. You can then switch the car into Sport, Sport Plus, and even Track modes, and that makes everything in the car more responsive, stiffer, and yes, even louder. Unfortunately, it never really gets loud enough for my taste. And even at full throttle, you're not really hearing the exhaust note. Instead, inside the cabin here, you're really hearing the air intake noise, which Acura actually sort of pipes into the cabin right behind your head, a lot like the way McLaren does it in their cars. Another area where the car did sort of leave me lacking was the launch control system. Sure, it's fast, but I felt like there was a bit of a lull from the first sort of boost right off the line to when it actually really takes off. It doesn't pull like a 911 turbo in that way. Whether it's the super rigid chassis or the magnetic ride shock absorbers, you just float along the road here. This car is incredibly comfortable to drive. Acura is making a really big deal with this car about the sight lines. Now, I know that that's not nearly as sexy as big horsepower numbers, but let me put it to you this way. If you can see out of a car really easily, it gives you a lot of confidence, and confidence in a sports car is something you definitely want. I mean, they spent a ton of engineering effort into making a tiny A-pillar, and you can see it right here. I mean, it really is very thin, gives you great visibility. On top of all that, the dash sits really low, and something that I'm super happy about being a tall driver is that the roof doesn't overhang over top of your view. When I pull up to a light in this car, I don't have to sort of duck down to see what color it is or when it's going to change. I just look up. It's that easy. At 6'1", I have plenty of room in here, although I should point out when I get in and out of the car, I do have to sort of duck. Now, speaking about the cabin, it's amazing how true Acura was to the idea of the original NSX. I mean, when you consider all the futuristic technologies that drive this vehicle, when you look around in here, it's amazing how simplistic and clean it all is and how easy it all is to use. I really love the look of these digital gauges, and this matte carbon fiber steering wheel is super exotic. Unfortunately, both the tilt and telescopic functions are actually manual, which is strange for a car that costs as much and is so fancy. At the same time, there's some other little bits of switchgear inside the cabin which I think aren't quite as premium as they probably should be. Driving around town, the electric motor in this vehicle means you never really have to use first gear. Now, as a result, even though it is a dual clutch transmission, there's none of the jerkiness you normally associate with those types of cars. I have to say, this has got to be the most livable supercar I have ever driven. So is it worth it? Well, it's certainly not expensive when you consider its competitive set of vehicles, but we're still talking about $156,000 to start for an Acura. Let me start by saying I might be the wrong person to answer this. I haven't mentioned the styling of this car yet because it's totally subjective, but for me it's probably worth the cost of entry based just on the looks. Of course, you're getting so much more, and I'm not just talking about supercar performance you can live with and drive every day. This car does such an incredible job of making it all feel so natural that it's easy to forget when you're driving the Acura NSX.